911, what's your emergency?
Trainer down! Orca has the trainer! We need help right now!
Imagine a cold, misty morning on February 20th, 1991, at Sealand of the Pacific in Victoria, British Columbia. The air carries the sharp tang of salt water, mingling with the excited chatter of a packed crowd filling the bleachers. Their eyes are locked on a small concrete pool where three orcas, Tilikum, Nuka, and Haida, slice through the water, their sleek black and white bodies gleaming under the harsh stadium lights. Each leap, each spin, is a mesmerizing display of raw power and grace, orchestrated by a young woman at the pool's edge. Her name is Keltie Byrne, a 20-year-old marine biology student, her face alight with passion and purpose. She's living her dream, guiding these majestic creatures through their performance, her voice ringing with confidence as she cues their movements. The crowd roars, captivated by the spectacle, unaware that beneath the surface, a tragedy is brewing, one that will shock the world and expose the dark underbelly of orca captivity. This is the story of Tilikum, a killer whale pushed to the brink by years of torment, and Keltie, whose love for these animals led to a moment that would change history. Buckle up for a tale that's as heart-wrenching as it is gripping, a story that will hold you from the first word to the last. The show was a triumph, the audience erupting in applause as Tilikum launched himself skyward, his massive 22-foot frame crashing back into the pool with a spray that soaked the front rows. Nuka and Haida followed, their synchronized spins and dives drawing gasps of awe. Keltie, dressed in her Sealand uniform, stood at the pool's edge, her smile radiant as she signaled the orcas through their routine. Her connection with them was palpable, a bond built on months of patience and care. For Keltie, this wasn't just a job, it was a calling. A marine biology student, she'd spent years poring over textbooks, captivated by the intelligence and complexity of orcas. Her part-time role at Sealand was a dream come true, a chance to fund her studies while working hands-on with the creatures she'd grown to love. Her enthusiasm was infectious, her laughter a constant presence among her colleagues, her dedication earning their respect and the orcas' trust. As the audience began to file out, their voices fading into the chilly air, Keltie stayed behind to tidy up. The arena grew quiet, the only sounds the gentle lapping of water against the pool's walls and the distant cries of seagulls circling above. She moved along the pool's edge, her sneakers leaving faint prints on the damp concrete, a long net in her hands as she scooped up plastic toys and debris floating on the water surface. The orcas circled below, their dark shapes gliding silently, their eyes tracking her every move. To Keltie, it was routine, a moment of calm after the adrenaline of the show. But to Tilikum, Nuka, and Haida, it was something else entirely. A break in the crushing monotony of their confined lives, a spark in a world of endless repetition. The concrete was slick from the morning's mist, and Keltie didn't see the wet patch until it was too late. Her foot slipped, her body pitching forward. She gasped, her arms flailing, the net clattering to the ground as she plunged into the icy water. The cold hit her like a shock wave, stealing her breath, but she was a strong swimmer, a competitive athlete in her high school years. She kicked toward the edge, her hands reaching for the concrete lip, her mind focused on pulling herself out. She'd dry off, laugh it off with her colleagues, maybe share a story about her clumsiness over coffee later. But then she felt it, a sharp, unyielding tug on her ankle. Her heart stopped. She looked down, and there in the murky water was Tilikum. His massive jaws were clamped around her foot, his teeth gripping her tightly, not enough to crush, but enough to hold her fast. A scream tore from her throat, raw and primal, echoing through the near-empty arena. Tilikum yanked her backward, dragging her under the water's surface with terrifying ease. The world above vanished, replaced by a disorienting blur of blue-green water and muffled sound. Keltie thrashed, her lungs burning as she fought to break free, her hands clawing at the water, her legs kicking against the unyielding grip. Nuka and Haida joined in, their curiosity morphing into something darker, more instinctual. To them, Keltie wasn't the trainer who fed them, who guided them through tricks. She was a new presence in their pool, something alive and moving in a world that offered nothing else. For years, their only toys had been lifeless plastic objects, pushed around on command to entertain the crowds. Now they had something that reacted, that moved, that fought, and they weren't letting go. Tilikum was a colossus, his 6-ton weight and 22-foot length dwarfing Keltie's slight frame. He could have crushed her in an instant, but he didn't. Instead, he seemed to toy with her, dragging her to the bottom of the pool with effortless strength, his movements almost curious, like a cat batting at a mouse. Nuka and Haida followed, their massive bodies bumping and nudging her, their teeth raking her skin, leaving gashes and bruises that bloomed red in the water. Keltie fought with everything she had, her legs kicking against Tilikum's grip, her arms reaching desperately for the surface. She broke free for a moment, bursting through the water, gasping for air, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. "I don't want to die," she screamed, her voice cracking, her words a haunting plea that pierced the hearts of the handful of staff and onlookers who had rushed to the pool's edge. Panic erupted, a chaotic symphony of shouts and footsteps. Trainers and staff converged on the pool, their faces pale, their voices overlapping in a frenzy of fear and desperation. There was no protocol for this, no training manual for what to do when an orca turned on a human. Sealand's rules strictly forbade trainers from entering the water with the whales, a precaution born of their immense power, but it was useless now. Karen McGee, Keltie's fellow trainer and close friend, grabbed a life ring and hurled it toward her, shouting her name with a voice thick with panic. Keltie's hand stretched out, trembling, her fingers brushing the buoy's edge before Tilikum surged forward, blocking her path. The orcas were relentless, their excitement palpable, their massive bodies moving with a terrifying grace that belied their size. The staff tried everything to intervene. They threw handfuls of fish into the water, hoping to distract the orcas with food. They banged metal buckets against the pool's edge, the sharp clangs echoing through the arena. They slapped the water's surface with their hands, shouted recall commands that had guided the orcas through countless shows. But Tilikum, Nuka, and Haida were beyond commands, their instincts overriding years of conditioning. Karen's voice broke as she called Keltie's name again and again, tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking as she clutched the pool's edge. The orcas weren't malicious, they were products of their environment. Creatures driven by boredom and instinct in a world that had stripped them of everything else. But to Keltie, trapped in their grip, it was a waking nightmare, a fight for survival against forces she could never overcome. Keltie surfaced again, her strength fading, her movements sluggish. She reached for the edge, her fingers grazing the concrete, so close to safety she could almost taste it. But the orcas pulled her back, their teeth sinking into her legs, her arms, her torso, leaving marks that would tell a story of struggle. Her screams grew weaker, her body battered by their relentless assault. When she surfaced one final time, she was still. Her eyes were vacant, her body limp, floating lifelessly on the water's surface. The orcas had drowned her, their play turning deadly in a matter of minutes. Her clothes were torn away, her skin covered in bites and bruises, a testament to the violence of those final moments. The staff stood frozen, their breaths shallow, their minds struggling to process the horror unfolding before them. Keltie Byrne, the bright, passionate student who had dreamed of working with orcas, was gone, the first person ever killed by a captive killer whale. The orcas didn't stop. For 2 agonizing hours, they circled Keltie's body, nudging it, pushing it, treating it like a toy in their sterile, concrete world. The staff watched, helpless, their hands trembling, their hearts heavy with grief and disbelief. Finally, Tilikum, Nuka, and Haida grew bored, and the staff used a large net to retrieve Keltie's body, pulling her from the water with shaking hands. The scene was one of unimaginable devastation. Trainers sobbing, onlookers in shock, the weight of the tragedy settling over Sealand like a dark cloud. Keltie's lifeless form, battered and bruised, was a stark reminder of the power of the creatures she had loved and the fragility of the human lives intertwined with them. To understand how this tragedy unfolded, we have to go back to Tilikum's beginnings, to a life that was stolen before it could truly begin. In 1983, at just 2 years old, Tilikum was captured off the coast of Iceland, a brutal act that tore him from his mother and pod. Orcas are among the most intelligent creatures on Earth, their brains rivaling those of primates, their social structures as complex as human families. In the wild, Tilikum would have stayed with his mother for life, swimming alongside his pod, a tight-knit group that could span 4 generations. Orcas form lifelong bonds, care for their sick, mourn their dead, and display emotions as vivid and varied as our own. They swim hundreds of miles a day, dive deep into the ocean's depths. Their lives a symphony of movement, connection, and freedom. But Tilikum's world was shattered when he was netted, his mother's cries echoing as he was towed behind a boat to Canada, a journey that left him disoriented, alone, and far from the ocean he was born to roam. At Sealand, Tilikum was dumped into a tank barely larger than a backyard swimming pool, a concrete prison for a creature built for the vastness of the sea. There he was forced to perform mindless tricks for cheering crowds, day after day, with no variation, no stimulation, no semblance of the life he was meant to live. The pool was a mockery of the ocean, its shallow depths and unyielding walls closing in on him, offering no escape, no reprieve. Worse still, Tilikum shared the tank with Nuka and Haida, 2 older, dominant female orcas who bullied him relentlessly. They raked him with their teeth, leaving bloody gashes on his skin that stung in the chlorinated water. They rammed him, their massive bodies slamming into his, asserting their dominance in a space too small for him to flee. For Tilikum, it was a life of unrelenting misery, his vibrant spirit eroding with each passing day, each attack, each performance that stripped away another piece of who he was. Keltie's story, in contrast, was one of passion and promise. A marine biology student, she was driven by a deep love for the ocean and its creatures. Her part-time job at Sealand was a dream come true, a chance to put her studies into practice, to learn from the orcas she admired so deeply. She was meticulous in her work, spending hours observing their behaviors, building rapport, earning their trust through patience and care. Her colleagues adored her. Her laughter filled the trainer's lounge, her enthusiasm a spark that lifted everyone around her. She knew the risks of working with such powerful animals, but nothing could have prepared her for the horror that unfolded that day. Her dream, so full of hope, became a nightmare. Her life cut short by the very creatures she had dedicated herself to understanding. The aftermath of Keltie's death was a seismic shift, a moment that reverberated far beyond the walls of Sealand. The tragedy made headlines around the world, from Vancouver to London, from New York to Tokyo. The public was stunned. How could an orca, a creature they'd seen as a friendly performer, turn into a killer? The story dominated news cycles, with reporters dissecting every detail, from Keltie's final moments to the conditions at Sealand. But those who studied orcas, who understood their intelligence and emotional depth, were not surprised. Paul Spong, director of Orca Lab, a research group dedicated to studying wild orcas, put it starkly: if you pen a wild killer whale and deprive them of almost all mental and sensory stimulation, they are going to become psychologically damaged. Tilikum wasn't a monster. He was a victim, a creature pushed to the edge by years of confinement, isolation, and abuse in a system that prioritized profit over welfare. Sealand became a lightning rod for controversy, its name synonymous with tragedy. The park shut its doors in 1992, just a year after Keltie's death, its reputation in tatters, its ticket sales plummeting as the public grappled with the ethical questions the incident raised. How could animals as intelligent and social as orcas be confined to tanks a fraction of their natural range? How could trainers be expected to work safely with creatures whose spirits had been broken by years of captivity? The tragedy sparked a wave of activism, with voices rising to demand better treatment for captive orcas, to question the very premise of keeping such creatures in confinement for human entertainment. Tilikum, Nuka, and Haida were rehomed in the wake of Sealand's closure, their futures uncertain. Tilikum was sent to SeaWorld in Orlando, Florida, where his conditions improved. Larger tanks, better veterinary care, a more structured environment. But the psychological scars of his early years at Sealand were permanent, etched into his mind as deeply as the physical scars on his body. The young orca, who had once swum freely in the Atlantic, surrounded by the songs of his pod, was gone, replaced by a creature haunted by his past, a ticking time bomb in a world that continued to confine him. At SeaWorld, Tilikum's story took darker turns. In 1999, he was involved in the death of Daniel Dukes, a man who had snuck into his tank after hours, perhaps seeking a thrill or a connection with the orca. In 2010, he killed Dawn Broncho, a seasoned SeaWorld trainer, in an incident that bore chilling similarities to Keltie's death. Dawn, like Keltie, was passionate and skilled, her bond with the orcas a cornerstone of her career. But Tilikum, driven by the same psychological damage that had surfaced at Sealand, pulled her into the water during a performance, ending her life in front of a horrified audience. Each tragedy was a grim reminder of the toll captivity takes on orcas, turning creatures born for freedom into unpredictable forces, their pain manifesting in ways that humans could neither predict nor control. Keltie's death became a catalyst for change, a turning point in the fight against orca captivity. It inspired the 2013 documentary Blackfish, which brought Tilikum's story to a global audience, peeling back the curtain on the grim reality of theme parks like Sealand and SeaWorld. The film exposed the cramped tanks, the shortened lifespans, the psychological torment inflicted on orcas in captivity. In the wild, orcas can live up to 80 years, their lives rich with social bonds and exploration. In captivity, they rarely reach 30, their bodies and minds worn down by confinement. Blackfish struck a nerve, igniting a firestorm of protests and boycotts that hit SeaWorld's bottom line hard. Attendance plummeted, sponsors pulled out, and the company faced mounting pressure to reform its practices. The public outcry fueled legislative change. In 2016, California passed a landmark law banning orca breeding programs, a direct result of the movement sparked by Keltie's death and amplified by Blackfish. In 2019, Canada went further, outlawing cetacean captivity altogether, a victory for activists who had spent decades fighting for the freedom of orcas and other marine mammals. These laws were a testament to the power of Keltie's story, a reminder that her death, though tragic, had not been in vain. It had forced the world to confront uncomfortable truths about the cost of entertainment, about the ethical lines we cross when we confine wild animals for our amusement. For Keltie's family, the loss was a wound that never healed. Her parents, who had supported her passion for marine biology, struggled to reconcile their pride with their grief. They spoke of her boundless energy, her love for the ocean, her dreams of making a difference in the world of conservation. Her death left a void in their lives, a pain that lingered in every memory of her laughter, her determination, her light. Her colleagues, particularly Karen McGee, carried the trauma of that day for years. Karen spoke publicly about the guilt that haunted her, the endless replaying of those final moments when she threw the life ring, when she shouted Keltie's name, when she watched her friends slip away. The image of Keltie's lifeless body floating in the pool was one she could never unsee, a nightmare that followed her into her dreams. Emergency responders who retrieved Keltie's body described the scene as one of the most harrowing of their careers. The sight of the orcas circling her, nudging her lifeless form, was a trauma they carried long after the day was over. They spoke of the eerie silence that followed, the weight of knowing they could do nothing to bring her back. For the staff at Sealand, the tragedy was a collective wound, a moment that bound them in shared grief and guilt. They had worked with Keltie, laughed with her, watched her grow as a trainer. To lose her in such a brutal public way was a blow they would never fully recover from. Tilikum's life continued to unfold in tragedy. He died in 2017, still in captivity at SeaWorld, his body ravaged by chronic infections, his spirit broken long before. At 36, he had lived only a fraction of the lifespan he might have had in the wild, where orcas thrive in their natural pods, surrounded by family and freedom. His death was mourned by activists who saw him as a symbol of the cost of captivity, a creature whose pain had been ignored for too long. His story, intertwined with Keltie's, became a rallying cry for those fighting to end the practice of keeping orcas in tanks, a reminder that these are not performers, but wild animals with needs we cannot meet in confinement. The legacy of Keltie's death is complex and far-reaching. It forced the world to confront uncomfortable questions about animal welfare, about the ethics of turning wild creatures into spectacles for profit. It highlighted the intelligence and emotional depth of orcas, creatures who feel joy, grief, and pain as deeply as we do. It exposed the cruelty of stripping them from their families, confining them to barren pools and expecting them to perform for our amusement. Above all, it was a call to action, a plea to rethink how we treat the animals we share this planet with. The ripple effects of that February day in 1991 are still felt today. Animal welfare laws have tightened and public perception has shifted dramatically. SeaWorld ended its orca shows in 2016, bowing to pressure from a public that no longer sees captivity as entertainment. But the fight is far from over. Orcas still languish in tanks around the world, their lives a shadow of what they should be. In places like Russia and China, new facilities continue to open, capturing and confining orcas despite the lessons of Tilikum's story. Activists continue to push for sanctuaries, coastal habitats where retired captive orcas can live out their days in environments closer to their natural homes. Keltie's story and Tilikum's is a tragedy, but it's also a warning. It's a reminder of the consequences of our choices, of the cost of ignoring the needs of creatures as sentient as orcas. It's a call to look beyond the spectacle, to see the pain behind the performance. As you listen to this story, think of Keltie, a young woman whose love for orcas led her to a job that should have been a dream, not a death sentence. Think of Tilikum, a creature born to roam the seas, reduced to a shadow of himself in a concrete cage. Their story is a plea for change, a question that lingers in the air. Will we listen? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with a friend. With your support, we make our content better and better. See you in the next video.